Black advocates are sounding the alarm on the impact of the Supreme Court's decisions to overturn affirmative action and President Biden's student loan debt forgiveness plan.
What side are you on, my people? What side are you on? We on the freedom side.
They're warning that both will disproportionately affect Black families. Advocates say both student loan forgiveness and affirmative action, which the Supreme Court ruled against in two separate cases this session, are racial justice issues.
It's not done until it's done, and we're going to keep fighting.
Student debt is embedded into the fabric of our educational system. And it is told to us time and time again, for us to get a good paying job, for us to have the opportunity to thrive in America, that we have to get an education to be part of that system. But what has happened is that Black folks have disproportionately felt the weight and the impact of student debt, particularly Black women, right? It is expensive to be an educated Black woman in America today. And so oftentimes we don't realize the burden that comes with that and the limitations that happen when you have that crushing amount of student debt.
Altogether, women hold nearly 2/3 of the U.S. student debt. But while white women graduate owing about $22,000, Black women on average graduate with more than $37,000 in student debt. This amount of student loan debt follows Black women even once they land a job after graduation, said Kristen McGuire, executive director for the progressive advocacy organization Young Invincibles.
Black women are going to school and taking out loans to finance their education. And then we have what I like to call an imperfect storm, where Black women enter the workforce. They make less than their white female counterparts, and then even less than their white male counterparts. In fact, a Black woman with a bachelor's degree makes less than a white man with some college, no degree on average.
That student loan debt, compounded by wage discrimination, affects many Black Americans' ability to buy homes, build discretionary wealth, and in effect, reduce the racial wealth gap. But arguments against student loan forgiveness range from the overall cost to the government to the harm it would cause taxpayers and the likelihood of higher inflation. In the Supreme Court case brought by the two students, it was a lot simpler. The plaintiff said student loan forgiveness is simply unfair.
When folks ask that question of fairness, right, we have to recognize that life has not been fair for many of us, right? There are decades of oppression that the Black community has faced. There are ways in which we have been kept out of the institution of powers systematically, right? We have to recognize that this is a time to put people above profits. It's a time for us to ensure that we are creating more opportunities to really achieve equity.
But that question of fairness has also come into play not just around paying for higher education, but for simply attending these institutions. Since 1978, schools have used race as an ingredient in selecting their student bodies, following the affirmative action policy, which broadly refers to policies that favor individuals who have been subjected to previous discrimination. But race-conscious admissions have routinely provoked a pushback, often from white and Asian American students who say it is discriminatory. The case before the court argued that Harvard and the University of North Carolina illegally discriminated against Asian Americans and white applicants when considering admissions. But advocates like Satra Taylor, Director of Higher Education and Workforce Policy and Advocacy for Young Invincibles, say this is an attempt to misconstrue what affirmative action policies accomplish.
It does not mean because you are Black, because you are Latinx, or because you are Asian American, you automatically have entry into college. Affirmative action was a powerful policy lever in response to the racial inequities within the higher education system. It was a lever to redress the harm in terms of the historical exclusion of historically marginalized communities.
McGuire added that race-conscious admissions does not mean all other requirements are disregarded in admissions, but rather that the school is considering the importance of diversity on their campus.
This by no means that the Black students who are accepted or the Indigenous students who are accepted are not as qualified as their white peers. That's a misconception that we have to really fight hard against, because it's not a handout. When we say equality and equity in our country, it's important to center the people who actually helped build this country and make an investment in them so that they can continue to build up themselves. We've had far too many decades and centuries of poor policymaking and racist policymaking so that we weren't able to kind of build ourselves up as other races were able to do. And affirmative action kind of gives us the ability to start to make that foundation for ourselves.
9 states have already prohibited the consideration of race in public university admissions, including California and Michigan. But both states admitted in amicus briefs last year that ending this practice has seen drastic decline in minority student admissions. Cole from the NAACP said affirmative action should be looked at as an accountability measure to ensure that institutions represent the demographic makeup of America. But affirmative action is also necessary, he said, to ensure Black students can see a future that includes them in places they have been excluded from.
The people who have access to higher education, the people who are able to pay their way through higher education, talks about who has access to these jobs of power for our future, right? All of it is connected, all of it is one, and all of it is strategic enough to understand that if we are not allowing those who are most marginalized in our communities access to these spaces, they will not be put into those positions of power.